Hello and welcome. I am Light, and this is my podcast. Today I have as my guest hosts Jeremy and Rob. Hello, guys.
Hey,
Hey,
And they are going to be discussing near death experiences from a religious standpoint. And then also, we're going to talk about DMT and psychedelics and how they could be related to near death experiences. And are they exclusive of each other, or could they work together? So I want you guys to bring your science caps and your paranormal hats, and we're going to dig into this. Before we get started, I'd like to say this. Tomorrow is the last day of the 31 days of Halloween, and I have had a great time. My last video up tomorrow. Thanks everybody involved, but I'd like to do that real quick. So I'd like to give a thank you to Rob and producer Jeremy and to Jory and to Madison and to Brian and Diabolical Witness and to Nick and Kenny, who went on a paranormal ghost hunt when they did not have to. And did I already say moderator Maya? And my moderator Maya, who is going to be having a video up tomorrow. Her and I are actually doing a combined video. And everybody that put the work in and helped and did podcasts and did stories and research, and I really appreciate it. I had a great time. I hope that you guys really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun for me, and I couldn't have done it all by myself. And so thank you, and thank you guys for showing up. Also, I have gotten my second denial for being monetized, so I guess we can go wild on here. And if you feel that you would like to support this channel and my work and what we do here, then I am asking you to consider doing so through Patreon or my Teespring account, in which we have merchandise for sale. And if you're not already subscribed, please do so. It is totally free. And we get paid in love around here. Now, I guess I can shoot it over to you guys.
right.
Did I catch everybody to thank? Did I miss anybody?
I think you might have missed Jeremy.
Nope, he was second.
She got me. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yes. Jeremy does a lot in the backgrounds that you guys see if you're watching the podcasts. And we appreciate that. And of course, he's contributing to this podcast for the 31 days of Halloween, and did in September too. So thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
All right. So why don't you guys convince us if we're going to heaven or hell, and please make it heaven.
Jeremy, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I can go first.
Okay, mate.
So yeah, as Exolite said, we're going to be talking about near-death experiences, and we're going to be coming at it not from two different point of views, but just from two different additional angles, I guess you would say. So we're just going to be talking about the age-old question, what happens after you die? It's something everybody's wondered at some point in their life, and it's been at the helm of human philosophy for as long as we've been self-aware. It's a question nobody can truly answer until their time is up, but as they say, there's a lot of people, as we're going to talk about on this podcast, that have actually gone to what they say is the other side and come back to tell the tale. So we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff like that. I'm going to be talking from my point of view from about 1,000-year-old practices and stuff led by shamans and ancient and modern religious ideals and like holy books and stuff. All the evidence is there, I feel. I personally think that like everything has a piece of the puzzle. Every like religion, every piece of philosophy it's all the pieces are there. It's just such a big piece that I think we're all just kind of centered in our own corner, you know, like, oh, I got the bottom left corner. I think this is what the picture is, and you know, but in reality, I think they all go together and make a very wide scope of experience. We're gonna talk about, or we're gonna talk from different points of views. Like Rob's gonna come at it from like a religious. I'm an omnist, so like I said previously, is I believe that everybody has kind of a piece of the puzzle. So I believe in like the duality and the cycles of things. My point of view is not going to be in opposition of Rob. It's not going to be like this or that. It's going to be this and that. So try to keep that in mind. It's not an opposite point of view. It's just an additional thing that I'm trying to work into the theory that we're talking about, which is the near-death experience. So that's pretty much where I'm coming at it from. I'm going to be talking about like psychedelics, ancient religions, shamans, and stuff like that.
But here's what I want to know. Did you bring enough for the whole class?
Yeah, I got it in my little black baggie.
Okay.
Spread it around. Everybody gets their portions.
Okay. So, Rob, do you want to do your introduction to what you're going to do, or just have Jeremy continue?
No, sorry, I was just getting a drink.
Stop. Stop it.
Oh, here we go. You're not even on the podcast, you're doing it.
That's going to be my contribution tonight. Stop.
Okay.
I'll be your snake.
Thank you.
Wait, what?
Right. That's my serious voice.
Right.
In the Western world, we've taken death out of the home. When we think of dead relatives or dead friends, people who passed on, we would never think of coming to see your dad or your mum or your sister or your brother in your living room, laying in a coffin. I can remember seeing my Uncle Gerald when he died in my grand's front room. I can remember being encouraged to talk to him and say my goodbyes at home, not in a funeral parlour, not at the graveside, but that one-on-one personal say my goodbyes, and I believe that can help somebody move on. But this was later in the podcast. I don't know if you're aware that some cultures, they preserve and keep their dead in their homes for years. They are treated like any member of the family. And when I say any member of the family, they're not like kept in a corner of the room. They sleep in the beds with the people. They're preserved, so they're not like a big rotting corpse. And then every day they are gotten up out of bed. They are dressed in new clothes, and at night they are undressed, put into their nightwear, and this is repeated for years and years and years. Now, they have a completely different view on how like I said, the death has been taken out of the home, and I can hear let me get my bloody voice right. What has all this got to do with near-death experiences? Well, in my mind, my experience is looking at this from a Catholic point of view and a believer in near-death experiences. We have to understand the process of death from all points of view. Science does play a part, but we have to look at the history also. For 6 centuries, anecdotal evidence and accounts have been taken about the visual and tactile events that took place during death. But how can science explain similar accounts that have been taken over 6 centuries all over the world? And this last little bit of my introduction, I think, is something I didn't know, but I don't think it would stand up against anybody's argument. Did you know that blind and deaf people who have been blind and deaf from birth, if they've had an accident or an operation and they've died, they will all talk about the same kind of tunnel and seeing loved ones, and actually blind people have talked about seeing and colours and figures when they've not ever seen anything. And I think that really, really amazed me when I read that.
Yeah.
And that, my friends, is my introduction. Ta-da.
I love that. I love that.
That was really well worded.
Pretty finished.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating about the blind people.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. That's
okay. So that gives me hope.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really deep thing that I think that's kind of what where I'm approaching it, is like, this is a deep connective experience that's a human experience from what we know, and it's not going to be held back by your religious beliefs, whether you're atheist or religious. It's not going to be held back by, you know, some kind of disability that you have, whether you're blind or, you know, can't see, or blind or can't hear, like you're deaf. It's like it's an all-encompassing scope, and these experiences all kind of have very compelling similarities, like not just with near-death experiences that don't seem to involve any kind of chemical compounds, but you know, these are the kinds of experiences that shamans have had for thousands of years. I mean, like Rob said, there's history there that, you know, people like to look past. They like to look at the sciences and the history and the teachings that came before us and set us up for everything we know today. Kind of like, oh, that's old news. But in reality, the real ingenuity of those ideas was more than groundbreaking. It was world building. Like, it's the foundation of everything. And one of those key pillars in that foundation is the near-death experience, or death as a whole, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Jeremy, do you think it makes a difference about the way we look at death now? Like I was saying at the beginning of my introduction, I remember my Uncle Joe, when my Uncle Joe died. I don't know if maybe it's a Catholic thing more than anything else, but we would go, and I've been to a few wakes where they would go from the home, and we would be there with basically a dead person in the house and on display in an open coffin. Do you think that makes a difference to maybe how we view death, as it's this thing that is hidden away? Death is one of them. Death, when you're born and when you die, nothing else is as significant as those two events. You know, we hide from death. We like to basically put it in a cupboard, and then when someone does die, it's the end of the world. But if we look at it from point of view that it isn't the end, and like these people, these tribes, if you had a loved one that died, but you saw them every day, would that make your grieving easier, or do you think it would make it just as difficult?
Right. I mean, yeah, that's a really interesting thing. The idea that, you know, our biggest question that we have is a question that we don't necessarily want answered. It's a question that we like to run from more than we like to try to pursue it. We like to hold it off. We like to put it in a hospital and keep it on life support. You know, we like to out of sight, out of mind, push it away from us, like you said. And I think there's a lot to learn from someone let alone a society that is willing to embrace death in that kind of way. And I don't think like it can be detrimental to the discussion or the philosophy of what death is and the human experience at all. I think if anything, it's another factor that goes into just a very deep thing we have as humans to make that connection with someone living. And then, you know, what happens, that connection's still there. Obviously you don't stop caring for the person the moment they die. So what exactly are you caring for? Are you caring for a soul? You know, are you caring for something that you see within yourself in them? You know, like what exactly is there? Keeping the body in the home, is that what we care about, or do we care about the person they were? You know, there's a lot of different ways, but I think it definitely makes a difference, as far as, you know, instead of trying to push death away and act like it doesn't exist, to kind of embrace it. You know, if we can't have the answers, at least we can be content with the unknown.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
You know, in that movie My Girl that came out in the, I don't know, 80s, I guess, with Macaulay Culkin.
Oh yeah.
Her relative died and they had them in the house. And for me, I think for me, I don't think that would help me at all. You know, I think maybe if you're raised and that's what the norm is, I guess, and you can say goodbye for longer, maybe it would help in the way that you can say goodbye longer rather than having an ambulance come and take your loved one away. Or, you know, like my mother died in the hospital, you walk away and then you don't see them again until they're, well, maybe not at all. If they're cremated, you wouldn't see them again at all. And maybe that abrupt end is what's hard on people. So maybe if you had, because I know like some cultures, they bathe the body and go and sit with the body for a few days and are able to say goodbye. When my mom died, we all went to the hospital and spent about 5 hours up there. Same thing with my grandpa. We went up to the hospital, we sat around, we sang and prayed, and I thought that was a really nice way. So I can see that having even more time to say goodbye to a loved one is what would be beneficial, not that I would want them in my house per se.
Can I just add something before I
Mm-hmm.
forget?
Yeah.
Something, it's to do with something Jeremy said and something what you've just said. Jeremy, and I thought it was a really good point actually, about us looking at the dead person or the dead relative and seeing something of ourselves. Now, do you think that you not have wanting to have the corpse, the body, in your house or in your home? Do you think that maybe is more to do with you and looking at your own mortality as a reflection? You're looking at this dead body, your dead relative, and it's maybe too much.
No, because I see people who like will go up to a dead body and kiss it, or even kiss it in the coffin and touch it. When they called me and I went up to the hospital to see my mom, they had fixed her bed and made it. She looked like she was sleeping.
Yeah.
I couldn't touch her. I refused to feel her cold. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do a hug, I couldn't do a pat, I couldn't do a touch, nothing. So to me, I am just not comfortable around a dead body, and the temperature thing to me is unnatural to feel. And now, and I'm not now. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I'd feel like if it was my child. It would probably be a different situation. I guess because you would just get over that. But in general, as older relatives, let's go with older relatives who have passed. It's just not. It's not something I'm comfortable with. So I don't think it has to do with my mortality. Although when my mom died, that was one of the first things that came to my mind. Like, okay, I'm next. No matter when that is, it's my generation that's next.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you, Jeremy?
That's a very, very good point. Like, I think that's kind of what Rob was trying to hint at too, is like this, if you see that person still sitting in the chair they sat in when they were alive, if you see that person still being, visually a part of the family, and knowing that person still, if there's any part of them in there, they know that they're loved because you're keeping them around. That may be a reflection on how you want to pass on. I don't want to be forgotten. I don't want to leave this chair that I've had since I was a kid. I want to be with my family forever. So I think that it could stem from a lot of things. It could stem from just the kind of love or respect or kind of what you want for the person that passed away, or it could be what you want from yourself,
Right.
And, yeah, because that's definitely something that went through my mind when my mom passed. And I was only 17, so it wasn't like I was ready to die, but it was a very big thing in my head that just kind of
you were next.
Yeah, it floored me that this is real, in a way.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, what's weird is both of us had grandparents alive when our mothers died, and yet still I felt like, oh, I'm next, even though I had a grandmother, my mother's mother, who was alive, and you did as well. And I don't know what, but it hit me like, oh my gosh, that's me now.
Yeah, I think it's like you see yourself in that person, especially if there's someone if they're a mother or a father, definitely. I mean, you're literally a part, that person's literally a part of you and you're a part of them. So
yes,
it's a very compelling feeling to be like, my mom died. That was half of me. So when's the other half going?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I did talk. Sorry.
It was a really, really good point. I one of my things is, if I'm not looking at it from if I try and not look at it from a religious point of view, how do you feel about this, Jeremy? I cannot get my head around the fact that how complex the human body is.
Right, yeah.
That we are only just here for that small time. I just don't feel. I feel there's got to be something different. There's got to be something else, because we're this unbelievable, magical body that does amazing things and is amazing.
Yeah.
But I just feel that, well, you die, that's it. And it seems like a bit of a waste.
It does. I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, the common argument you're going to find with that is people are going to say, well, they're gonna say something along the lines of, that's a selfish way to think. You're a human, so you think humans are the best. Well, dolphins are the third smartest creature on the planet. They may think that they're number one and they're the alpha life form on the planet. And while I understand that from a logical sense, nobody can deny that in the human heart we feel something more. We feel a kind of love that's never been expressed. We feel a kind of connection that has never been expressed. And I'm talking about in nature and just science. So if we're as complex as the scientists say, which we obviously are, that complexity, that just tells us right there is the complexity is just way beyond anyone's true knowledge. And to discount our heart just because our brain wants to say, well, there's a lot of life forms that, have done great things, and there's a lot of life forms that have impacted their ecosystems and show love and show connection. And yeah, I don't think that that's discounting the human heart's will to be like there's something else. I think those two can stand side by side. The common thing with religion is, like lots of the texts say, God made us in his image. And there's a quote by Ram Dass where he pretty much, it's the same quote. But he says that the human experience is God looking back at himself. So, that sounds like, it sounds like the same, God made us in his image, but what he's really getting at is that we are all connected by the simple fact that we're humans. And the simple fact that we're humans is not a simple fact at all. If we, really dig deep into our chemistry, I mean, if you want to really simplify it, we're big meat bags with a bit of bone that just has a bunch of chemical reactions going on. That's why drugs impact us. That's why drugs have an effect on us, is because we have those chemical receptors and we have those chemicals that interact with those chemicals already in our body. We're already drug machines running around, flesh and bone, So the human experience is it's an experience of God looking in on himself. Humans are the only animals in the animal kingdom that can take an abstract idea like art or music, something that doesn't exist and is only inspired by what exists, and make that a reality, manifest that into the physical world. If I think I want to build a brown box made of, rosewood, then I'll imagine that in my mind, get the proper utensils, and make that thing a reality. And there's no other animals on the planet that can do that. And there never have been, as far as we know. So for us to be able to have that immediate impact on our physical world from an internal world that seemingly doesn't exist. I mean, your thoughts seemingly don't exist. They're electrical impulses. That's, if you really want to get simple, that's what they are. But they obviously are more than that. There's obviously a heart to the brain, it feels like. There's memories, there's emotions, there's thoughts, ideas, inspiration, melodies. When you get a song stuck in your head, it's like, what is that? If I'm thinking of something in my brain and I can make that in the real world, that's God. That's God showing himself to you, showing himself to the world, and showing you that you are exactly what you kind of, everybody wants to make a difference. I think we all kind of hope that once we die, we'll back kind of imprint on either people or the places that we've ventured, or anything really. Write a book, leave behind something that will inspire, will show love and make emotion happen. These things that are all abstract, we want that. There are obviously people who want a big statue of themselves just for an ego trip, after they die, oh, I'll be standing over, looking over everybody past when I'm turning over my grave. There's obviously those people, but I think the greater margin of people's true yearning to withlast in the world, or create something that can physically withlast their mortal body, I think that's way deeper than just I'm a human who this body dies and then I'm gone. I think there's something way deeper than that. Well,
I think that's why some people are a driving force for people who are artists, of any type, painting, drawing, music, is that after they die, they will have left an impact that continues on. We go to museums and we see famous artists who, when they died, they weren't famous artists, but their life continues on. And
Yeah.
I think that is, part of what art is.
Yeah. I mean, that abstract connection. I mean, you look at a Van Gogh painting and you're transferring a type of energy that literally didn't exist until he put it on that canvas, that
Right.
abstract idea, that surreal turn in reality was made from nothing, like seemingly like the Big Bang, like it's just an idea. Can I grab an idea? Can I hold an idea? No, I can't. But I can grab a paintbrush and put that idea to a canvas, and then that can touch someone in an abstract way that they can't explain. It can love it. It can make them sad. It can make them feel like they're at home. Like there's a lot of complexity to, the, I've used the term whenever I've been talking as the conflict between the heart and the brain, but I think, like most things, in my opinion, that's not really a conflict, but a duality, a kind of cycle, a kind of synergistic push and pull that is necessary. I don't think that the brain can't feel. I don't think that the heart can't think, or the heart isn't intelligent. And I'm not talking about your physical like heart. I'm talking about like what people would deem as like the soul, or you don't necessarily say you love someone with your brain, but I think in a way that's true.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. That makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah. I mean, what is your feelings on whether there is a God and there's Jesus, and do you have any beliefs along those lines, or are you completely a skeptic where that's concerned?
So where that's concerned is I was brought up religious. I've had more of a fear in God and a fear in the classic, really misconstrued idea of heaven and hell. And I grew up with that, and I didn't necessarily, it wasn't a tool that I felt like was bettering me. It felt like it was a tool that was making me just second guess a lot of things. And like I didn't go to church maybe like 5 times in my whole life. So it's not like I'm saying that I had like some parents that were overbearing on my religious views. It was just like, oh well, do good things. If you want good things to happen, it's in God's hands. They kind of just simplified stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a part in my life, especially right after my mom died, where I really wasn't into the idea. I probably considered myself a full-on atheist for a short period of time, and then I transitioned a little bit once I came to peace with certain things, and now I consider myself an omnist, which, like I said before, I believe in cycles. I believe there's a push and a pull, there's a duality to things, and every religion, I think, has a piece of the puzzle. Every religion is right in its own way. We're all telling the same story. We're all God looking in on himself. We're all having that experience as humans, and we're portraying it as if we're telling a story to each other, but we already all know the story. I'm no different than you or Maya or Tracy. Like I'm a human, and you're a human. So any idea that I have about whether Jesus Christ did, the things that he did, or whether anything that is written down is true or not, that's me projecting an idea of a story that we all already know. Like, I think And when I say I think we already all know that, we all feel love. Like there's not I don't think that's up for debate. Like everybody's felt love. Everybody's felt extreme sadness. Everybody's been in a type of spiritual focus, whether they want to refer to it as a spiritual experience or not. Like waking up the first time light touches your eyes, you know, in the morning. That's a spiritual experience, in my opinion. That's a spiritual experience. You're literally coming back from another world where you didn't know that this world existed. In your dreams, you were a frog, and that you accepted that. You questioned that. You didn't question that at all. You were a frog who was being chased by a wolf for whatever reason, and that was your world. That was your reality. That was what you deemed the properties of the universe. And then you wake up, and the light touches your eyes, and you realize again the kind of spiritual experience that being conscious or being alive is. And I think the fact that we can have that at all, I would lean more on the idea that it doesn't go away more than it just stops when you die. You know, I think why don't we just go to? I mean, I know there's a lot of scientific reasons, but in my opinion, it's like when we lay down to go to bed, why do we have to have dreams? If that's not a spiritual experience, then I don't know what is really. You know, like you see your mother, you see your father that passed away, you see these people, and you talk to them, and sometimes you don't even act like you don't even realize that they're dead, even though you know that they've been dead for 15 years or whatever. You know, you get into that world, and it's the rules have changed, and it's not until you come back that you really realize what you had before. And I think death, I like to think of death as that exact same experience. You wake up and the rules have changed. You may remember your life as a human on Earth in the reality that you in the reality of Robb or the reality of Jeremy, but the truth is we can only ever see through our own eyes. So it's fairly impossible, I think, to just assume that hallucinations aren't reality and that reality aren't hallucinations. I think they're one and the same. Einstein himself said that reality is an illusion, and people take that as like some kind of faux atheist or atheist like ideal, but no, he's saying that God is real, but we are him and he is us, and everything around us is a part of that. That's kind of how I feel. I feel like there's like an overall consciousness that we all kind of tap into, and I don't think it ever ends. I think it's an ebb and flow that kind of feeds this duality of love and hate and good and bad and any kind of spectrum of human philosophy or emotion that you can think of. I think that's really what I believe is God.
Yeah. I like what you said about looking at life through your own eyes. I believe that, and I can say this from experience, I feel that dying, when somebody dies, you have a lot of emotions. But if you cared about that person, the death could almost be like love, because you're sensing and you're feeling. That's what the pain is. The pain is love and loss and fear. Because when I lost my sister, she was only 15. I went through all the emotions. I think I went through all the emotions in sort of 24 hours. Anger, loss, love, fear that I didn't think I would be able to go on without my sister. And even though I was the older one out of us, but do you I mean, might be a bit difficult for you to answer, but I do agree that we look at our lives through our own eyes. Do you think that that can spread to, if you're a parent, you can look at life through your children's eyes, and you can look back on your life through them? And I think that's why it's so difficult well, it's difficult anyway, when a child dies before their parent.
Mm-hmm.
Completely, how, see, I don't know how you could cope with such a personal, I don't know how you could cope with death without um, looking at it from a religious point of view, because, and maybe that is just me talking through fear, or saying that through fear, because I would be scared to face that on my own without knowing that there is something out there that is going to be. I couldn't bear the fact that my loved ones who have died, that that was it for them. I mean, I've sort of covered that before, but excuse me, I was just getting a drink. I really like I really like your argument. Maybe argument's the wrong word. I can 100% get behind pretty much everything you said. And I do believe that science has got a role to play. But my frustration is I I can and I just talk about me. I can accept that science has a part to play in near-death experiences and what happens when we die, but science doesn't seem to want to meet me halfway. That's what frustrates me about, and I believe that we we spend millions and trillions of pounds or dollars or whatever on trying to find out what's going on in space and what's this and what's that. And I think the biggest frontier we need to look into is our own minds, and whether,
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that, Rob. Yes.
and because they say that we've only discovered 5% of the oceans. Well, how much of the brain do we really know about? Because we don't really know anything, really. There's so much more to learn. I mean, they reckon that we only use a small percentage of our brains, and there's lots and lots of other stuff there that they don't understand, but they won't accept certain things, which doesn't make sense, does it, really? Well, in my opinion. Does that make sense, what I've just said?
Totally, totally, and I definitely agree with you. Like the research that's going on right now with psychedelics and the human mind is, they're having breakthroughs after breakthroughs. I mean, this is a frontier that has been pretty much been on prohibition for, since the late '60s, because of, the LSD scare, if you want to call it. So the expansion and the research into the human mind is starting to ramp up again. And I think it's an exciting thing to see, because I agree with you 100%. The human brain is the most powerful processor on this planet, as
Yeah.
bar none. So and the real trick to that one is, nobody had to make it. It just kind of happened. We didn't say, hey, let me get one of those brains. We just kind of were born with it. So lucky us. And I think that's the true hint of God in nature, to me. That something that complex can be created in a type of...
Yeah.
It's really hard to explain, but I want to tell you a story. So there's a couple stories that I want to tell. There's a comedian who he's on like the Joe Rogan podcast, and his name's Ari Shaffir. He's just a Jewish comedian who's like had a pretty cool life, right? Like he travels a lot. Well, he did DMT, and for those who don't know, DMT is N,N-dimethyltryptamine, and it's a tryptamine that's theorized to be endogenous in the human body. They found trace amounts in the lungs. They don't know where it's produced. They found it in trace amounts in rats' brains, but they don't know where it's produced, and they don't know if it's produced in our brains. But the trick to that is the Egyptians theorized that exact thing thousands and thousands of years before with the pineal gland. The Egyptians worshipped the pineal gland. They had statues and stuff made of it, shaped like a pine cone. And turns out, if we look in modern medicine recollection, it's shaped like a pine cone. So we know, confirmed that they were worshiping the pineal gland in some kind of spiritual way, and they saw it as the access point to death and life. And not only that, but the Eye of Horus has a very close resemblance to the cerebellum and the midsection if the brain was cut in half. So that lends to the idea that Egyptians were doing very advanced brain research, like surgery or chemical research, to suggest to them that the pineal gland was important. And it turns out that in that study where they found the trace amounts in the rats, the highest probability of the gland producing that endogenous dimethyltryptamine or DMT was the pineal gland. So it's a really interesting thing, because on one hand you have a physical brain, you have physical neurons, and they fire off and we can measure that. And then you have the chemical soup that's throughout your whole body, constantly being produced and offset and balanced. And there's so many interactions within our body that on the base level we could just simply discount them as flesh, or discount them as nerve tissue, or discount them as chemicals. But they obviously have very impactful interactions with us on a spiritual level. I mean, the story I'm about to tell is Ari Shaffir. He's a comedian. He did DMT, and DMT is like one of the quickest psychedelics out there. It lasts about 30 seconds to a minute, and that's like the peak experience. It's not like just a little bit. That's the prime experience. And Ari Shaffir, his story goes along the lines of he takes the hit, and he is immediately, from his recollection, a Asian man, and not an Asian man. That's a different story. He's a man. He's not Ari Shaffir. He's someone else. He's just a man, and he literally lives a life to, I think he says, like around 50 or 60, where he gets married, has kids, and then dies. And then 45 seconds later, he wakes up and he sees Joe Rogan laughing in his face, and he's like, "How long was I out?" And Joe's like, 45 seconds. So
Wow.
So he lived an entire lifetime from his perspective in 45 seconds. And I think people really, really like to discount that part of the brain. They like to say, "Oh, well, yeah, we have neurons, and we have, receptors, and we have brain tissue, and we have cerebellum and the pineal gland." But how does that interact with us on a spiritual, a perceptive, and how does that experience affect us? Like, what does that do? What is the pineal gland's function? And I think that's just one of those stories. Like, there's so many stories of DMT that relate to that exact kind of experience or very similar. This isn't a DMT experience, but this is a experience that we're all tapping into, I feel, in different ways. DMT may be the key for this certain part of the experience, this piece of the puzzle, and coming close to death or dying may be, you know, the full puzzle, or it may even be a piece. Who are we to say that death is even the last part in the process? You know, we like to think as birth beginning, death end, but is that really the case? We don't really know anybody who's made it past step 2. So, I mean, we have figures in our books that, you know, have done so, but what is the change in experience? I mean, we can all agree life when we're 5 years old is nothing like life when we're 15, and that's not a long time. And I'm not saying by like, oh, you have like more responsibility. I'm talking about perceptive experience of life, being able, like, forming memories in a different way, novelty of interactions, and just the overall way that you see the world is drastically changed in that short amount of time. And, you know, we take that as like the brain developing and you being able to tack on these functions for the brain. But in reality, I think those functions are always there, because people who, like you said, people who aren't even religious and people who don't necessarily believe a certain doctrine, they'll see Jesus, or they'll see an angel, or they'll be a 2-year-old kid who doesn't even know what an angel is, and see something that resembles pure love and protection over them, and then their parents will be like, well, that was an angel, you know? So there's something there, that there's a function in our brain, and our body, I believe too, that is deeper than just neurons firing off and hearts beating and blood pumping, on the base level.
Yeah. I mean,
can I just break in here real fast? I'm sorry. Diabolical Witness says that he was knocked out unconscious by a car once and was not breathing, but he could still hear everyone talk about how he looked dead and telling someone to call 911, and that there was somebody crying. He said he laid there and he could see a light. He assumed it was a street light, but after the fact, it was actually dark, and he was listening to everyone talk. He said it went on for a minute at least, and there was no pain. And then for whatever reason, he opened his eyes and stood up. He also said that he lost 3 months of memory, and he had a girlfriend that he didn't know because he was on his way to her house when it happened. So he said that was an awkward meeting.
Whoa, I bet. Wow.
So that's interesting.
it's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Can you? Oh, I can ask the question. Does he come from? Is he coming from a religious? Is he religious, or is he skeptical about religion? I just thought that would be interesting to know for our bit later on in the podcast.
Yeah. Brian, you want to tell us that? He says Christian. Yes.
All right. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, who's to say that this isn't a dream?
Merrily, 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 life is but a dream, huh?
Yeah, now we're getting deep. We're getting deep.
I like where this is going.
If this could be a dream, and our dreams could be our reality, our waking
God, I hope
life.
not.
Yeah, I mean,
Why do you say? Tracy?
Yeah?
Why do you say that? I hope not.
Because I tend to work through my quote-unquote issues while I'm sleeping. So I have therapy dreams where I talk to people like my mother. And I hope that's not what my reality is.
Okay. Well, other than Tracy, do you think Tracy's on a different dimension?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other podcast.
Einstein said there was 26 of them, so she's got some to choose from.
We just don't really know, do we? We don't know.
Right, yeah.
I hope I've got this right. You used to do, was it lucid dreaming?
Yes.
Now, I've always wanted to ask you about this because it fascinates me. When you were dreaming lucidly, what did things seem real? Did things seem real?
See, now that's kind of, I think, why I've always had an issue with I guess, the traditional religious doctrines and following that, is that I started having lucid dreams very young. Like, I think my first one was maybe before I was even 10, and I still remember it to this day. And vivid dreams and lucid dreams are totally different. A vivid dream feels totally real. You can mark off distinctions and characteristics in the dream world in a vivid dream better than you can recall your own room, how you left it. Like, if you're not there, like it gets that deep to where it's a hard question to ask, because I think the trick is novelty. So novelty is, it's that experience of learning something new or finding something new, or not necessarily actually having it be new, but having it feel new. Novelty is connected to deja vu. Novelty is connected to childhood memories. Novelty is connected to nearly every structural every structural perceptive experience we have. If we see something or experience something, novelty 9 times out of 10 has something to do with why it makes sense to us or why it matters to us. And in dreams, both lucid and vivid, novelty is very, very, very much a thing. It's very intense. You'll feel like your room that you've always seen is new in some way. But you maybe can't quite put your finger on it. It's almost like dreaming helps you find things out that you already knew. Like Tracy was saying, like, she solves her problems, when she's sleeping. That's kind of like a natural function of the brain to be like a passive problem solver. And with that comes novelty, because, like I said, 9 times out of 10, that function is required for us to make that impact our lives and our experience. If I say, hey, don't put your finger in that socket, you'll electrocute yourself, or don't put that fork in the socket, you'll electrocute yourself. There's being told that and having the knowledge, and then there's the experience of novelty, where it's like something that will stick with you forever. Like, whether you stuck the fork in the socket or not, if that trigger of novelty resonates with you, then that'll be something that will impact you. And it's theorized. I was watching on Joe Rogan. He had a brain scientist, for lack of a better word. I can't exactly recite his credentials, but he had a very reputable guy who knew a lot about the brain and sleep particularly on the podcast. And he was saying that we dream every night, which I think we all know, and we only remember about 3% of that. And like, all that is still stored. All those dreams and all those experiences are still there. So it's almost like you're living a second life. And he was saying the more compelling thing that he was saying was, those experiences, whether you remember them or not, have an effect on how you are as a person. And that, I thought, was a very compelling thing to say, because that almost lends to the idea that we're programming ourselves or setting ourselves up in a way that we don't even know about. Like, we're running from a bear in a dream, but we don't remember having the dream, and we have no recollection that the dream ever took place, and it's affected how we react to a big dog walking down the street, and we may not know it. There was a while ago where I first moved to Texas, and we saw a cow that was like near my house, and me and Maya thought it was a bear, like instantly. Both of us both thought it was a bear, and it seems like the most ridiculous thing, but I think that's one of those things where it's like your brain has a function to be like, if this, it may be too late to tell you don't put your fork in the socket. It may be too late. So what is the brain's function to prevent that? What's the preemptive measures to solve the problems before the problems arise? And I think the dream world is the first step in that. So yeah, I think life could definitely be a dream. It's not surreal for me to think that, you know, we're gonna die and then wake up exactly how we wake up in the morning, just in a different reality that until we actually got to that part wasn't even on our radar. You know, like, you don't expect what you're gonna dream about. You don't conjure that usually. You know, there's a lot of things that definitely play into it, especially with stress dreams and stuff, but can't manifest that willingly unless you lucid dream. And I think that's why I was so interested in doing that. It was definitely an experience that felt in no other way anything but spiritual. Like it was spiritual 100%. You know, every lucid dream I've ever had, whether it was just me walking down some street or if it was some amazing landscape that I was able to somehow manipulate, it was a spiritual experience 100% of the time. And I think it felt that spiritual because of the novelty, like I said, involved in that experience. So yeah, it's...
Well, I can lucid dream. And to me, it doesn't feel, it's not a reality at all. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm dreaming. And I can manipulate things in a room. If there's something that isn't right, I can change it. One particular instance is I was running from somebody and I came into a lucid dream, started to become a lucid dream. I was running for somebody, and in my dream, I couldn't get the door to close to keep them out. And in my dream, I said, okay, this door needs to change. And I changed the door and I locked it. And I can realize if I'm in a dream with somebody, like say my grandfather, and I can think, oh, I want to spend some more time here and make that happen. But it's not a religious kind of experience to me. It's just, to me, it's just, well, when I'm not working through my issues, it's just a different way of dreaming where I control the dream and I know I'm dreaming, and I can, like, I had this one dream where I was walking past this, I was in this like a, oh, what are those little people called in the Lord of the Rings? What are they called? Yeah. So I was like in a hobbit kind of an area. And I walked past this little hobbit house and somebody opened the door and I felt this amazing amount of joy that I had never actually felt in real life. A completely different type of joy. And I thought, oh, I want to continue to feel this. So I stayed in that area for a while in my dream, chose to, and I can still recall what that felt like. But that's what I like about it, is like I can pick and choose, you know, what to do, where to stay, who to see, how long I want to stay there. And I've always been able to do it. I don't know why, but Jeremy tells me that monks practice doing this and try to get to that level. And I'm like, I just have a weird brain that allows me to do it. It doesn't do me any good. I mean, it's not like it's making me a millionaire or anything, but it is very interesting that I can manipulate my own dreams, and I'm fully aware that I'm dreaming.
So, can you answer this question? Well, I'll put a question out there for both of you.
Yep.
I had when I lost my sister, I used to have dreams, and they were so real
Hmm.
that, and it was we were together, and we were in a beautiful place, somewhere I didn't recognize, and but it felt real. It felt real. Now, I don't know if it was just with the grief side of things, but a lot of mornings I used to wake up and I would be upset that it was only a dream. So really, really upset me the fact um, that it's all over now, and it wasn't real. I was so convinced it was real. And do you think that that is just some more to do with grief than to do with, because I still feel that these dreams were different than the normal sort of back
I,
the
that's
normal
not a
type.
lucid dream. That's not a lucid dream. Yeah, that's a vivid dream. I've had dreams where I woke up and fully believe that I have had this experience, and maybe not even I just had this experience, but I did. This happened in my life. I fully believe that it happened in my life, and it has taken me sometimes, like a couple of months ago. I don't think that happened in my life. It's just that real, and I think that when you like with your sister dying, now from a religious aspect, I could say that it's possible that she came to you in a dream. There were times where I would say, I want to dream about such and such, whoever the person I lost. Like I recently, in May, lost my lifelong best friend, and I could say I really want if to come to me in a dream, and sometimes that does happen, and we can have a conversation, and it's not a lucid dream, it's a vivid dream. I can't change anything at that for this type of dream, but I believe that you can have a spiritual something happen to you when you're dreaming. And it could be that your brain is working something out. It could be that too, because like I said, my dreams mostly are therapy dreams. I'll call my husband and he'll say, "How'd you sleep?" And I'll say, "Oh, it was therapy." He knows exactly what I mean. That I like told somebody exactly how I felt about them. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
or this is what you did that hurt me. And he'll be like, "Oh, so that was a long night." Yeah. Um. So it could be that it was a therapy dream to you too. But I
yeah,
do believe that and if let's say on a pure let's say it was a therapeutic dream, and she came to you, it's no less valid than if she had come to you, because if it helped you, it helped you.
Exactly.
mm. So, what do you guys think of one of the things that I don't understand, and even with all the evidence, obviously we've got millions and millions of people's own personal experiences. When you have scientists who don't believe, who basically are just science, and then they themselves have uh, a near-death experience, whether it's
Hmm.
an accident or whatever happens to them, they actually have the near-death experience themselves. When they come round and start to recover, they have completely changed their point of view. Now, do you
Hmm.
think that that could just be the chemicals, or do you think that the chemicals that are released when you are close to death, do you think they go hand in hand with the spiritual side or the religious side? One is there to help the other, or do you think it's just
Hmm.
coincidence?
No, I definitely think those two coincide. Like that's the basis of my belief in this is that that realm, whether you want to call it a spiritual realm, religious realm, or whatever, a dream realm. The way that we interact with it is based off of chemicals, but we're still interacting with that world. I don't think that means that it's solely the chemicals. It's like trying to, you know, it's like trying to fault something for its function, or say that thing. I'm trying to find the right way to word it, but I think that the chemicals that are interacting with our brain and interacting with our body serve a purpose to enhance our consciousness in a way that helps us tap into that extra dimension or world or whatever you want to call it, whether it's through near death, whether it's through DMT. They all have very similar outcomes when someone gets to that breaking point. When in DMT, it's called a breakthrough. If you have a breakthrough trip, that means you've hit the Godhead, you've hit the center of the universe, you've blasted off, and every part of your ego and every part of who you used to be diminishes into a single point of focused energy where you realize we're all one, we're all God, we're all in this together. And it has the same impact as someone who has a religious breakthrough, in the sense that they change their life and they're like, wow, my whole outlook on life has changed off this one experience. And it's funny how we're very hypocritical as humans. Like, we're like, you gotta go through so many years of school and listen to your parents, and this is how you learn. You read books and you gain knowledge. But literally, no matter how many books you read, one moment of a spiritual experience can change your life more than a book ever can. And that's always shown time and time again. But we're kind of hypocritical in the sense where we're like, oh well, that's an anecdote, that's one off, that guy's an anomaly. Well, maybe not. Maybe that realm exists and we're all tapping into it in a different way, whether we're tapping into it when we go to sleep, we're tapping into it when we take psychoactive compounds, or whether we're tapping into it when we're near death. And do we go to it once we have fully died, or is it just right back to where we began? Because I mean, if you were able to look at the consciousness of a baby, and the consciousness of somebody whose frontal cortex is fully developed at around like age 23, there's very little in there's very little to really differentiate the two. I mean, there's a lot physically that changes, and there's a lot that's perceived to have changed. We can never truly figure out the consciousness of a baby. So if we can't figure out the consciousness of a baby, then how do we, even dare to ask the question, where does our consciousness go after we die, Let alone where did we get it from when we became a baby? Did we always have it? Was it given to us? It's a very complex question, but I always like to think that the chemicals are the key, and there's a different way to go through the door every time, but I think it all leads to the same place. Whether you're taking DMT and that changes your life, or you see angels because you get in this really bad car crash, like both of those things can change your life in an instant, no matter how long of a life you've lived believing one thing or the other.
Yeah. So,
well, I think that scientists that I've listened to, and there's been TED Talks done, and they were scientists who were atheists and then experienced a near-death experience or something like that. I think that for the most part, from the ones I've listened to, sort of went on a spiritual journey then to find other people who have had the same experience. And when they came to the conclusion that so many other people had the exact same, no matter where you're born, what you come from, rich, poor, what part of the world you come from, or like you say, a blind person. So many people have such a similar experience that it caused them to not be able to justify it by saying, well, it's science. It's just a chemical. Because how then do I and somebody across the world from me who lives in, you know, a country that doesn't have electronics and doesn't have the population I have and doesn't have the experience I live, how do they have the same experience that I have, that I had?
Yeah.
And I think that comes into play there too, that it's hard to deny something when so many people are having from different backgrounds and education and life having the same experience. It's
I
hard to
mean, they
deny
found,
that possibly it is one experience.
yeah, they found, you know, tribes in the Amazon that have hardly had any contact with man, with man, with the outside world. I don't have talk some rubbish sometimes. Um, they've had limited contact with the outside world, and they will talk and give accounts of the same thing. And it's not, so it can't necessarily be down just to media and it just being
Right.
the latest thing kind of thing. But that to me just doesn't. That's where I think that science has got to be a little bit more bendy than.
It's got to be a team sport.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than trying to, well, I think the way science works is it wants to disprove the spiritual and prove the scientific. Where I don't think that where and spirituality, by the way, does something similar. Although I think that like like a lot of Christians don't believe in evolution, and I say that my belief is that I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I think we see evolution every single day. We plant an apple seed and we see it evolve into a tree. Our own when our own species comes from an egg and a sperm and evolves into a human being, not a chicken, and it
Hey,
takes nine
Tracy,
months.
don't
Well,
be getting dirty.
so I think we see evidence of evolution every single day in front of our eyes of how it starts with a seed and it grows. And so I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I don't think you have to believe in. I believe in evolution. Period. I don't believe in an intelligent design, or I believe in intelligent design, and I refuse to believe in evolution. I think we see that God creates by evolution in many, many ways. So I don't think that science and religion have to be mutually exclusive. I think you can be a Christian or a Muslim or Jewish or whatever you are and still believe that science has been given to us by God. We believe it when we take the medication we're prescribed. We believe it when we get on an airplane that should not be flying in the air. We trust science then. We trust science when we every time we answer our phone, and because if it had been left up to me, we'd still be trying to figure out how to start fire and waiting for an electrical storm so I could get a new fire. Um, you know, phones, all this science that we have around us every day that we trust, but then there's these other things that we completely distrust when I don't think it has to be that way. I think they can work very well together on both sides. I don't think you have to be like, I'm a scientist, therefore I'm an atheist. Well, why can't it be both? Why can't you also be spiritual and believe that you were given this gift and this knowledge?
Yeah, they're all pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. So we've been talking for an hour and a half, and I don't think we have yet talked about any one specific um, near-death experience that you've looked into, Rob, or anyone specific psychedelic DMT experience yet? Have we?
Well, there's the Ari
Well,
Shafir one.
Yes. Well,
But
that's true. We did do that.
I
And can we say that Ram Dass is two different names? Because for a long time, when Jeremy would talk about Ram Dass, I thought it was somebody's last name, or like they went by one name. So I want to clear that up. We're talking about
oh,
a
okay,
first
I
and
see what you mean.
yeah,
Okay,
it's a first and a last name.
yeah,
So if you guys want to look it up, look him up.
or
Can you?
or Richard Alpert, Ramdas, Ramdass, or Richard Alpert.
Yes. So I wanted to
well,
clear that up in case somebody wanted to look it up. That it is a first and a last name and how it was spelled. So thank you for spelling it for me. Okay. Yes, Rob.
I was just going to say I've looked at lots and lots of near-death experiences, and what I wanted to do is, or try and do, if you don't mind, I want to try and put it across and put basically match up my beliefs to what I've watched, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Do you mind if I go now, Jeremy, or do you want to go first?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I have watched lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of
Have you
near-death
watched
experience.
lots?
Well, just a little bit past lots.
Okay.
Just a bit past it. Okay. Um, can we keep it down in the sheep seats, please?
Oh, wow. You guys, I told you. Now, this is when I go, it's all right. I'm used to it.
Okay. I've watched a few videos and read lots of stuff on near-death experiences and people's experiences. Now, they are all, from a religious point of view, they are all pretty much the same. Now, I'm going to start the heaven and the hell. I believe in heaven as a Catholic. I don't necessarily believe in hell. Now, well, I do believe in hell, but not the fire and brimstone kind of hell. I believe hell to be like a purgatory.
Is
And
that what the Catholic religion believes, or you personally?
bit of both. Bit
Okay.
of both. I think that the mistakes we make during our time on earth, we go to purgatory, and I believe purgatory is a part of heaven, where we have to go and try and work out the things we did wrong or our beliefs. And I do think there is a part of heaven that, for all intents and purposes, will be like a hell, but not the fire and brimstone type. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because we have, I believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross so I could have my sins forgiven. I think murderers and rapists and paedophiles and the really, really, excuse me. You know what that sound was, Tracer?
What?
Did you hear a beeping sound before?
No.
Oh, okay. It was my alarm.
Oh no. You guys, you guys, the UK went through their time change, and we don't go through ours until this weekend. So we called Rob what to him was an hour early. We cannot get this straight. Poor Rob. Poor Rob's gonna just stay awake, prop his eyes open with toothpicks just in case we call. You never know.
But anyway, so I believe that people that commit them type of crimes, I think that's a whole different ballgame. And I think that it's just, you don't get forgiven that. But anyway, as a Catholic, and people's stories that I've heard who are also Catholics and are religious, are Christians.
Alexa. That's also an alarm. Sorry. Life's happening in my house, and Joshua has a pizza in the oven. It's ready.
Anybody else's alarm want to make a debut on
make an appearance?
Anyway, when I die, I believe that I am going to go to a long dark tunnel, and when I get through the dark tunnel, I'm going to meet my sister, my first wife, well, I'm hoping not to meet my parents, but that's another story.
You'd rather meet your first wife than your parents.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just move on past them.
Yeah, hopefully.
Or Rob, maybe they're different now.
Maybe they've learned a lesson.
Maybe.
I think that I will be judged. Like, I don't know if it's the same as what Jeremy was saying earlier, but I am scared of God. I am scared of him, but only to the point that I believe that, like, you would be scared of your dad if you'd done something wrong, your father if you'd done something wrong. And I think I will be judged, but I do think that I've led a pretty good life. Well, maybe not. Some of the stuff that me and Tracy have talked about, I don't know. I think I might have to.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We're neck and neck, me and Rob.
And I think that if the bad outweighs the good, I think that's when reincarnation comes in, and you can return to Earth, and you can try again, and you can try to make things right and make the right decisions.
That is not your church doctrine, though. Is that correct?
Say that again.
You maybe swallow too fast. That's not your church's doctrine, though, right?
Well, the Catholic Church believes in reincarnation.
They do?
Yeah, they believe in reincarnation. And I think that if you've lived a good life, you get the option of whether you want to stay or try and go back to do things to change the parts of your life which you've not necessarily done very well in. And that's why I feel that when someone has a near-death experience and they want to stay in heaven, if they've got stuff that they need to do, they get the opportunity to go back as themselves, not reincarnated, as themselves, try and to do some good and to. I think sometimes a near-death experience is like a bit of a wake-up call.
Okay. I'm confused here. Okay, one question first off. Brian says necromancy is a huge sin. Is necromancy trying to talk to the dead? Raising the dead?
Yeah, bringing them back, yeah.
Oh, well, I haven't done that yet. I'm working on it. But Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead. Anyway, the point of the story is, so let me ask you, because this is news to me about the Catholic religion. So you would go back as yourself. So no, you would have what?
I think you might have misunderstood me.
Hey.
If I died of a natural death, or and I stayed dead. I'm not talking about a near-death experience. I'm talking about the end of my life, whenever that may
Yes.
be. And I go to heaven.
Yes.
If I've been an arse, if I've not been a very nice person, I believe that I will go back. I will come back to Earth as a reincarnated person, not as myself,
Right.
and I will be given the opportunity to
Fix it.
fix
To learn
them.
your lesson. Okay, so I'm confused about that because you don't believe that you are saved by the fact that Jesus Christ died on the sin. Our sins are forgiven by the fact that Jesus Christ died on a sin. What, Tracy? Died on the cross. You Catholics don't believe that you were forgiven by Jesus dying on the cross.
I do believe that Jesus died on the cross for my sins,
Well,
but
then
I'm
you
talking about.
well then you're automatically saved. So
But
if you were okay, but you could improve your lot in heaven by going back and learning a lesson?
yeah, but
Oh, I see.
when you die, when you have a near-death experience, a lot of what I've listened to and watched and heard, a lot of the people could have wonderful families on Earth, and they could have lovely kids, and they could have good jobs, and they could have everything everything that they could want, and they don't want to go back to Earth. They want to stay in heaven. Now, a lot of the times, these people have stated and said that they've been told that they're going back, and there's no two ways
Yes.
about it,
Mm-hmm.
because they need to wrong rights in their life, and this could be the near-death experience. Then maybe it's not an accident. You know what I mean? Maybe it's like being recalled to the factory.
Whoops.
You
Gotta go back.
you get a kick up the arse, because a lot of the people don't want to go, even though they've got everything, they've got children, and as soon as they see that light, that's it. They just want to stay.
Yeah.
They just want to stay, and when they come back, and this is why a lot of the time when your doctors and your scientists and the ones who have the ones that have the experiences, when they come back, they completely change their point of view. Not only do they believe in God and in Jesus, they believe that they want to help people and maybe change the way they live. Maybe they were maybe they were selfish in life, and one of the lessons they need to come back is be more humble and more giving, and help your fellow man, so to speak. Does that make a bit more sense?
Yeah. I didn't realize that was part of the Catholic religion.
Well, I think Jeremy mentioned this earlier. If you break religion down to the bare bones, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, Hindus, not Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know. They're completely different on a lot of their beliefs.
Yeah.
I think fundamentally that most religions believe the same thing. They might have different names for it, like Allah is basically just God. It means God,
Uh-huh.
and Muslims recognize Jesus as a prophet. They recognize him as a prophet because they believe that God could not have a son.
Hindus do as well.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. I don't want to get onto all the troubles in the Middle East and stuff like that, but this is a bit that frustrates me, is because we're all so similar.
Well,
But
the Muslim religion and the Christian religions come from two brothers.
Yeah.
So they were both blessed by God. One was a quote unquote illegitimate child because it was who was it that couldn't get pregnant? Was it, I want to say Ruth, but is that correct?
Elizabeth,
No. She couldn't get pregnant, so she told her husband to have a child with the maiden, the handmaid. And then when she became like 900 years old, she became pregnant, and then she said, "Okay, now you need to get rid of her and her child." And that is where
oh,
the Muslim religion stems from, Abraham.
it's not
And
Lilith,
then you
it's
have, huh?
Cain's wife. Oh, that's Lilith is Cain's wife, first wife.
Yeah. And then you
Uh,
have the other child, and that is where the lineage from David comes down through, and that is Jesus Christ's lineage. So the Muslims, to start off with, Muslims and Christians were brothers. They were half brothers, and therefore we got a Muslim religion out of that and the Christianity out of that. What is the JD? JD, send me a text if you're listening, and you can tell me who the woman was, please, or anybody in chat. You can educate me, help me out here.
Forgot what I was going to say now.
Well, I wanted to touch on something you said earlier. When you were bringing up like the Amazon and the different stories that are told all around the world and their similarities, that's something I find really fascinating because you have stories of the flood that go.
Sarah, I'm sorry, it was Sarah who couldn't get pregnant, and she had her husband have a child with the slave girl, the maid, and that child was the father of the Muslim religion, and then his Ishmael and Isaac. So Ishmael and Isaac were the two sons. Ishmael was the quote unquote not legitimate child, and Isaac was the legitimate child. And Ishmael is the father of, yes, right, Victor, Sarah and Hagar. Yes, thank you. Hagar's child was Ishmael was the beginning of the Muslim religion, where Isaac was the beginning of the King David's lineage, which includes Jesus Christ. So they were really at a war of brothers, and God blessed them both. Hagar had put Ishmael under a bush, turned her back on him, and prayed to God that he would kill her child because she was kicked out with no food, no water, and she prayed to God to please kill him, so that I don't have to watch him suffer and starve to death. And God came to her and told her that he was blessed and he would be the leader of nations. And he was. And then Isaac was blessed by God as being the leader of men. And from that came Jesus Christ. And thank you today. If you could open your hymnal to page 112, we'll sing How Great Thou Art.
I correct myself. I've been to church 6 times now.
Sorry, I just wanted to clear up the Middle East and what the conflict has been, why it's been so long. That's why.
Okay.
Sorry. I said I wasn't going to talk.
But yeah, I mean that whole correlation between all the religions is super fascinating because it spans past 5,000 years if you truly want to look deep. You have the flood all over the world. It's told in a different way, but it's still a flood. You have the rebirth, you have resurrection. You have all these miracles.
A virgin birth.
Yeah. And they all kind of correlate, but they're all under a different name in one way or another. And it's interesting that you brought up the Amazon specifically earlier in the podcast, Rob, because there's a thing called ayahuasca, which is mainly used by the tribes in Peru, down deep in the Amazon. And like I said, these tribes, they for the most part had no contact with, like, civilization, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better word. They had their own practices. They still have shamans that are their doctors and their healers, and their prophets and their spiritual leaders. They've had a thing called ayahuasca in their possession for at least 3,000 years, and it's not written anywhere. It's all just passed down from generation to generation how to make this ayahuasca brew. It's essentially a tea made out of 2 or more ingredients, but you need 2 at the base of it. And you need an MAOI, which is usually these chacruna leaves that are found in the Amazon. And then you need this root bark from an ayahuasca vine. And that is what contains the DMT. And when you mix these together and then brew it in a very complicated manner, you get this very long psychedelic trip that blasts you off into the cosmos and makes you meet spirits and your loved ones and world destroyers and dark ones, and you might fall into the void, and there's a lot of things that happen, and it's like a 12-hour trip pretty much. And the interesting part is the way that they say they got this recipe is the plants told them. The ayahuasca vines themselves told them. There was no knowledge of this in any part of the world besides the Amazon at that moment. It's all passed down orally, oral traditions, and they're in the Amazon. Like, there's thousands and thousands of species of trees and vines and bushes, and for them to figure out to mix these 2 in this very complicated brewing process, the brew is like 7 hours long, at least 7 to 12, I think it is, to make this very, very potent psychedelic that's also long lasting, that is essentially the basis of their society. I mean, they use it for healing physical ailments, curing any kind of distress or grief or sadness or heartbreak or anything like that. They even recall it as a near-death type of tool, something that brings them close to the edge, but something they can come back from. And they use it for every practical implementation you can think of. And from all we know is the plants told them. Well, what does that mean? To me, it sounds like the Garden of Eden. To me, it sounds like the vine being a snake. To me, it sounds like the fruits of knowledge, the forbidden fruit, is these plants and these. I haven't talked about psychedelic mushrooms, but psychedelic mushrooms are the only compound on this planet that we know of that is psychoactive just by ingesting it. It's orally active, so you pick a mushroom up off the ground that's psychedelic. Don't eat any kind of wild mushrooms at all, ever. You pick them up off the ground, say, and eat it, and you break that down immediately into a psychedelic trip that can last 8 hours, and that's never seen at all in nature since. Ayahuasca has to be brewed for 7 to 12 hours with 2 very specific ingredients that are found among the Amazon trees with thousands of species. LSD had to be synthesized from ergot, the corn fungus, in a laboratory. And, you know, like there's a bunch of other ones. Peyote is a cactus that you have to extract it by either heat or extreme cold temperatures, and that's not practical. You can't just pick up the cactus and take a bite out and trip. But for some reason, these mushrooms, you pick them up, pop them down the gullet, and you got the mysteries of the universe being revealed to you for 7 hours. And to me, that sounds like
you also have my brother and his friends who stood on the couch
Yes.
holding the ceiling up for 8 hours.
Yes, you also have that, and the real interesting part about that, I mean,
Uncle Mike,
shout out. Get a donation for the Uncle Mike.
That's right.
Old Uncle Mike.
Go ahead.
The interesting thing about like just a normal quote unquote trip that isn't like a spiritual experience or anything is your reality is still being shifted very drastically. Whether you think it's the ceiling melting and falling on you, or whether you're seeing pretty colors or patterns, your perception, your reality, essentially, is being skewed by this compound, by this chemical. And for us to be vessels for that to happen, that's got to raise a couple eyebrows. Like, wait, why does this interact with us in this? I can put all the potent psychedelics I can find into a freaking blade of grass, or like a bunch of grass or like something, and there'd be no reaction, you know. But we find ways to incorporate these compounds into our bodies, and it can change our life forever, you know. Like, it's a very, very weird connection, and I think that goes hand in hand with all these religious tales of like seeing God and, you know, near-death experiences and resurrection and floods, that you know, it all kind of fits together. Like, if you're thinking of the Garden of Eden, you know, that mushroom could be the forbidden fruit, you know. The snake did say, or not the snake, whatever, the reptile said, you know, you will have knowledge, you know. That was the big
Yes. Yes.
That was
It was the forbidden fruit was the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. And that's what God didn't want them to have, was the tree of knowledge.
And like I said with earlier about novelty, when you take these psychedelic compounds, whether it be any of them, they're activated in your 5-HT2A receptors, which are your main serotonin receptors. They're partial agonists all the way through, and that essentially means that the chemical compound, the molecules are interacting directly with your brain chemistry. Directly. There's no trick of it. There's nothing unhealthy about taking these. These are all, you know, there's nothing physically unhealthy about taking a psychedelic. You know, it's not going to harm your body because of that. Your receptors are there for a reason. And I'm explaining this terribly, but it's almost as if these compounds are made to interact with our body. You know, it's like, well, if we aren't supposed to, you know, trip, then why are our serotonin receptors, which are arguably our most important receptors in our brain, because they control our diet, our sleep schedule, our happiness, our energy, tons of things. Serotonin is like very, very important. But for some reason, these compounds interact with those same receptors, and we have this life-changing occurrence, this shift in reality that dreams don't even come close to sometimes. And I think that's very interesting, and people like to account that or discount that as just like, oh, you're hallucinating, bro, it's not real. Well, I'm looking at a wall in front of me, but like Einstein said, if I break that wall down to the subatomic level, it's not a wall anymore. Nothing's even connected. Nothing's even touching. But I can feel this solid wall in my reality. Well, my reality is merely a projection of a certain type of perspective. And you have a compound change that perspective, or you have, you know, an experience where you almost die change that perspective. It's still changed regardless. Doesn't matter what it's from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can
Yes.
implement those life lessons the same way, no matter what.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah. That was really interesting. Do you know the what's it called? The You were talking earlier on about the different parts of the brain, and it's one of the things you mentioned. Was it? Did people call it the third eye? Or am I completely getting it?
Yes, you're right. I forgot to mention the pineal gland is located where people commonly refer to the third eye being, as well as the Egyptians referring to that being the placement as well. Thanks, Rob. I totally forgot about that.
I just was wondering because there's so this. We're gonna have to do a podcast, Tracy, about the. Well, we have to do a podcast about the brain. I think me and Jeremy and you could do that. I think it would be really, really interesting.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know whether what you would think about that, but I think it would be interesting to do because we're only scratching the surface here.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like we barely tipped the iceberg, like with
Right.
this discussion. Yeah.
Rob, can you tell me about the person who had the near-death experience and they think they went to hell?
Yeah. Just a second. Okay. Trying to remember. The guy, a gentleman, was I think he was a lecturer or something, and he had it was really, really wintry night, and he lost control of his car, and then he got the control back, and it slid down this bank and turned upside down, and he was in this like ravine, or not ravine, that's wrong. What do you call them in America? Like a
Ditch?
valley. No, it's bigger than a ditch. Well, like a ditch, what a big ditch. And he was he was the people that saw him go off the road. Phone 911. Yeah, is that right?
Yes. I think we would call it a ravine as well. Don't you think,
A ravine.
Jeremy? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a better word, embankment. And anyway, he died a couple of times on the way to the hospital, and they kept bringing him back. And they got him into the operating room, or the OR, or whatever you want to call it, and he died again. And this time, they thought they'd lost him, and he was dead for about 20, brain dead. We're talking here now, for about 15 or 20 minutes, and he can remember all this. He could remember all this panic, but all he could see was white, and he couldn't understand. And then he realised that it wasn't the white. He wasn't seeing the white. He was seeing the light, and he was face up to the ceiling. So then he realised all the commotion was going on behind him. So he turned round. He says he can't. He doesn't know how he turned around because he couldn't feel any body parts, but he was aware of his body parts, but he couldn't see any body parts. So he turned his spirit round, and he was looking down at himself, and he couldn't comprehend. He knew that the person that they were treating on the bed was him, but he couldn't comprehend him, which is probably how most people would feel if you were sort of floating on the top of the ceiling and you were looking down at your own body. Anyway, his family were called to the hospital, and they were in a waiting room. He wanted to try and get into the waiting room to see his family. Anyway, he ended up floating up and through the floor onto the floor above. And he kept rising up and up until he reached the roof of the hospital. And he flew out into the air. He didn't feel, obviously, if you remember me saying there was a really big storm and it was really wet and horrible, but he couldn't feel any cold. And then he went up through he kept going up and up through the unit, up through into space and through space and blah, 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 so far. Anyway, he got to this point where it was really, really dark, like a dark, you can imagine a really dark, maybe like a black hole, where there was no light at all. I'm not saying it was a black hole, but I'm just trying to use that as an example. And he went through the black hole, and he could see a light at the end of the tunnel. And he went towards the light, and at the end of the tunnel, he could see all his family and his friends and his loved ones that had already died and passed away. Oh, excuse me. And they were over like a river. And he wanted to go over the river to be with his friends and family, but he got dragged away. He described it as being dragged away. And he was going to this dark place. And he was still unaware. He couldn't feel any of his body. But he was taken to this dark place. And it was just dark. It was just no light. Absolutely no light. He said it was the darkest, most sorrowful, sad place he could ever try. He couldn't describe how negative this place was, and how he just didn't. He wanted to go back to the light. He felt that was. The way he described it is, we are all. When we're born, when we're born, we're hardwired to go to the light. That's what he was trying to say. We are meant to go to the light. To go into the dark is unnatural, and to stay in the dark, we couldn't survive in the dark. And even though he didn't see anything to scare him, or any monsters or demons or whatever else you expect to be living in hell, he just the actual how desolate and dark, and how he didn't even have hope. That's what he felt, and that was the worst part of it. He didn't even have hope. Hope had gone. Everything had gone. He was just here in this place, and he was going to be there for the rest of eternity. That's what he thought. And then all of a sudden, he was dragged. It was about like he was dragged back to the light. And then the next thing, he was going basically a reverse trip back down to the operating room. And he was back watching his body, and he could hear his wife and his children in the room next door. He still wanted to try and go towards his wife and his children, but then all of a sudden he was back in his body. And then all of a sudden, he hadn't been able to feel any pain, because obviously he'd had a really bad car crash. And as soon as he was back in his body, the pain hit him like a brick wall. And he said that as much as he didn't like the feeling of the pain, He said he would have 10 times that. He would gladly have 10 times that pain for him not to be in that really, really dark place without any hope. And he kept mentioning hope. That was the most the most debilitating thing was not having hope, and I can imagine that would be.
Was he a religious person?
No, he wasn't a religious. Let me just give Jessica go. No, he wasn't a religious person at all. He's a bit of an ass. But
So
can you understand? Sorry, go on.
After this experience, was he a religious person or still no?
He wasn't a religious. He didn't change into be a religious person. And this is something that I don't understand. And I was going to ask you and Jeremy this. He became very spiritual. I don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
I relate spiritual to believing in a God or, something like that. I believe that for me, that is what spiritual means. I can't collate the fact that someone can be an atheist but spiritual, an agnostic but spiritual. I don't really get it.
I have known people who consider themselves that, and what they mean by that is that they believe that there might not necessarily be a God, but that they feel that the universe and everybody, people are all connected. It's a very spiritual. Our energies are all connected and interactive. That they find spirituality in believing in the human race, in the power of Mother Earth, cycles, seasons, and everything has a season, including life and what we go through in life and etc. And that is what they consider being spiritual. I feel spiritual. I feel connected to my fellow human beings, but they don't necessarily feel that there's one God or even a God. Don't you think, Jeremy? Is that right?
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's how I would totally explain it. Is there's that feeling of more than skin and bone, that either they don't necessarily want to put a name to, or they can't put a name to. It's more of a feeling and a knowledge, whether it's an inherited knowledge or learned knowledge. Just they feel, like I said, a connection to their fellow human and the planet they live on and the universe that they exist within. I think that's pretty much the basis of it. It's not like they're not following the Bible and what the Bible teaches, but they may coincidentally be living the same life as a Christian because,
principles.
Yeah, the same principles and morals and things like that, just based off of something else that isn't the Bible.
Yes, not like a karma sort of a thing. What comes around goes around, and if you pass good energy, you'll get good energy. That type of a spiritual belief. And Diabolical Witness says they don't want to call it God. Yes,
well,
it's an energy sort of a thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, I consider myself spiritual but not religious. So, but at the same time, I consider all the religions I think have, like I said, a piece of the puzzle. It's just I don't think I necessarily have a problem with the term God. I mean, I think I've used it a couple times in my explanation of things. I just think of God in a different kind of definition, not as a immortal being that controls everything in the sense of creation, but a overall energy that is within all of us and connects all of us, and like you said, turns the clock, turns the seasons, and keeps everything moving, I think. But I don't have a problem calling it God.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in my personal experience, my belief is that I don't feel that When my kids were little and we talked about, is there a God? I literally like looked up, Googled, is there a God? Like, how do I explain to a child my belief in my faith? And there was this thing that came up and said, if you're walking through the woods and there's a pile of rocks and they make a pyramid, you wouldn't look at it and say, oh, that just happened. You would say it was created. So why would you look at a butterfly and say, oh, that just happened? You would think, oh, that was created. And that is my personal belief, and why I believe in God. I look at things as quote unquote simple as the birth of any animal, uh, human beings, as miraculous. I don't know, in my personal opinion, I don't know how you can really know the science of what happens to a woman's body when they become pregnant, and how it's their body's job to make sure it's not invaded by something. It's not supposed to happen. And I mean, the odds are astronomical that it could happen, yet every day it happens, and not think that is miraculous. Or see that nasty ass fish way down in the depths of the ocean who has that light that comes out over his head and it lights up to attract other fish so he can eat them. To me, I go, see, there's a God. That's how you know there's a God, because stuff like that exists. Like, how could that just come out of something, not have a intelligent creator, So that's how I view my faith and my religion, that I can't. It's why I think science and religion go together, because we know what it takes for a body to carry a child. We know that every uh, not fetus is the word I'm looking for. What's it before it's a fetus? It's a embryo. Every embryo looks like a chicken at one point. They all look like chickens. You can't tell them apart. And yet out of that, you get a dolphin, you get a puppy, you get a human, you get a bear. And we all look like chickens. And by the grace of God, I didn't end up a chicken, And so to me, science to me proves religion, because you see something like that. You see how impossible it is to have a child, and yet we do. And so that's why I am not an anti-science Christian. I think that they go hand in hand. And like I said, to me, science proves Christianity. And that might sound very strange, or it proves my faith. It proves my faith. It doesn't necessarily prove Christianity. It proves my faith in a God. That's what I should say.
Have you ever heard? I don't know if this is correct, but when a baby's and it's when it's first developing and the cells split and all the rest of it, how do them cells know to make a fingernail or an ear?
See, that's what I think. That's stuff we've learned through science. We didn't know that stuff before we had scientists, and they, unfortunately would have to do biopsies on, miscarriage babies and whatnot. That's how we learned how that stuff forms. And that's what I think, that we always joked that at the end of my pregnancies that we were just waiting for that last eyelash to go in, because something chemical signal when you should go into labor. And so we always would joke, well, we're still waiting for that last eyelash, or that, that gene that's going to form that one freckle that's going to show up when he's 13 years old is still waiting to kind of get put into the puzzle. That's what I think too. Like that and scientifically they say every freckle we're ever going to have has already been decided. It's in your genetics. That kind of thing to me is just mind boggling. How can that not be an intelligent design?
That's true.
So anyway, that's just my point of view. Obviously, Jeremy has his point of view, and doesn't, and he or anybody else might walk through a forest, see a pile of rocks, and not think twice about it.
I'm
They might go, oh, there's a pile of rocks.
I'd be like,
why did somebody put it there?
Like, I've seen the Blair Witch. I'm out.
Yes, I might think that too.
Jeremy.
So,
something we haven't talked about tonight, and I think it's important. What do you now? I'm going to ask you the question, but then I'm just going to say something quickly. Do you believe in that we all have a soul?
You want me to answer right now?
Okay, no. That's my first question.
Okay.
And the other thing is, they have proved that a couple of times that when a body dies, they put this elderly man, and he agreed to it and everything like that. That his bed was basically a huge set of scales, really, really accurate scales. And when he died, now sometimes we lose bodily fluids and things like that, but obviously everything was going to stay on this table until they had done the measurements and the weights. And I think it was on every occasion where they did it, and I'm probably getting this wrong, the body lost about 8 ounces. And they did this a few times. They wouldn't probably be allowed to do it today, even though people would probably let them do it. But yeah, so he was trying to find whether the soul was an actual thing. And there's stuff on YouTube as well about, I think it's called 8 ounces or something. What do you think about that from your point of view, and Tracy as well?
I think, I think I read something about that like a long time ago with the scale measurements and stuff. I'd love to see that replicated, like with the sensitive like weights that we have now, because it'd probably be a different reading, but it might be maybe more drastic than we previously had. It might be more than 8 ounces, and I guess the way I see it is, my line of thinking is, I like to throw around the term organic data. That being our genes, like Tracy was talking about, with like, everything being preformed or predetermined to form. I think that's all data. We like to call it instincts, but I think in reality that's all data. And it's organic data that's stored within our DNA, within our genes, and that makeup, that combination is probably the vessel in which the traditional soul would be, if there was a soul. I do think that there's an essence of a person that, no matter if you see them in real life, or you see them in a dream, or you see them in a vision, or you just daydreaming about him, there's an essence of a person that carries on, no matter if their physical body's there or not. I believe that 100%. And we know, as well as physics go, no matter can be destroyed nor created out of nothing or into nothing. Matter can only be changed. So the question is, if that data is there, that organic data is there, and you die, that can't be destroyed. The essence that was there can't just go away. That's not how things work. So where does it go? That's the question. Does it leave the body? And if it does, where does it go? Why is it leaving the body? I do think there's a soul, but again, not in the same, like, I guess not in the same way, but we call it instincts, but I think there's a type of organic data that runs through all of us, and whether you realize you have a specific skill set or work on that skill set, that's both one and the same, because your body's a vessel for these things, and anything within that that's kind of dictating things down to a freckle, or dictating, the kind of person you're going to be altogether. I think that is kind of what I believe the soul to be. And that doesn't mean that it's not a spiritual thing. Like I said, I think chemicals are our physical token into the other realms and the other dimensions. Like I said previously, Einstein believes that there's 26, and everything is just energy in a slow condensed vibration, and that's everything rips apart and is not touching once you go to the subatomic level. I can literally press my hand on the wall in front of me, but if I go down to the atom, nothing's touching. Not a single thing's touching. Everything's being pushed away from each other. In fact, everything's vibrating and moving. There's no stillness. There's no creation or destruction. It's all just changed. It's all just cycles. So if that soul is there, I don't think it is gone or anything. I think it has to go somewhere, because yeah.
Can I ask just this could be a very stupid question about that. How do they know that that wasn't air that came out of his lungs?
Well, air doesn't weigh anything, does it?
Well, yeah.
I think like the compression of the air in the lungs might weigh something because of the stress it has on the body, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
I don't know.
Well, a tire is heavier if you fill it with air, right?
That was my favourite fact.
I'm sorry. Maybe they made allowances for that. Maybe they put something over his mouth. I don't know. Maybe they made an allowance for air escaping his body. I was just wondering, like, could it have been air? And okay, I gotta say this first off. Brian says about being a Christian, we are alone in this world. If you can't make medicine, your illness will run its course. Does not mean that God does not exist. And I grew up, I don't know how, I gotta stop saying this, in a very religious family. And somebody we knew that was very close to us, she would not go to the doctor to cure her cancer because the Bible says that if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can get what what you're praying for. If you have the faith of a mustard seed. And so she prayed that she would be cured. And then when she died, the people we knew said, well, she must not have had enough faith. Boy, that's a really good way to really make people think this is not the religion for me. But it is exactly that. I believe that we have doctors for a reason. We have medicine for a reason. And that, like, I think it's Christian scientists who, yes, Josh, I think it's Christian scientists who believe that you should pray over illness and they won't treat their children. And some of them have gone to jail when their child dies. I think that if you look at it as these things have been placed here for us to use, then it's a completely different way of looking at things. Okay, so Josh wants me to tell the story that JD told to Josh a couple days ago. My husband, JD, by the way. So there was a man, and there was a hurricane coming, and it was going to flood. And they told everybody to evacuate the area. And he didn't. And when they asked him why, he said, God is going to take care of me. So people came to him and said, come on, get in the car, let's go. And he said, no, God's going to take care of me. And then the flood started coming, and people in boats came to him and said, hey, listen, get in. will save you. And he said, no, God's going to take care of me. And finally, his house was nearly underwater, and he was standing on a tiny spot on his roof, and a helicopter flew over him, dropped the bucket down, and said, get in. We're going to rescue you. And he said, no, God is going to save me. And then he drowned. And when he went to heaven, he said to God, I prayed to you. You were supposed to save me. And he said, hey, dummy, I sent people there to help you. So I think that it can be taken too far, and that we do have science and doctors and medicine to help us.
Yeah, that's like totally my whole like, not argument, but my whole thing that I'm trying to get across is like we all are being told the same story, and we already know, and we're just trying to find things that reinforce it, and we're trying to find the solution, but we just keep saying not that way, this way, but the solution's there, or not the solution, but the same idea, the essence of what we're all trying to pursue is there. We're just like, well, not in that way, not religiously, or not scientifically, or don't rescue me like that, rescue me like this, It's there. You're just you're being ignorant to the fact that it's not the way you perceive it.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody seems to know the right questions to ask.
Right.
So we can't really complain, can we? Really, because at the end of the day, everybody needs to be singing off the same hymn sheet, so to speak. And because people can't agree, we can't get an answer to the question.
Right.
That went down like a lead balloon, didn't
it? Good night, Victor. Have a good night. Thank you for coming. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about, Jeremy or Rob?
Gosh, look at the time.
I know.
Where did that go?
I don't know. It's a miracle.
I've really enjoyed it tonight, Jeremy. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was awesome. I feel like we barely scraped the surface, but like we got well deep in there, and I'm glad that it transitioned fairly well across a lot of different things. I was expecting to be hung up on one thing for a while, but like we were going in to like everything. we hit a lot of bullets, or hit a lot of points.
Bullet points?
Yeah, hit a lot of points there, yeah. So good.
Well, how about you, Rob? You got anything else you would like to add?
No, I've really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant. We, like Jeremy said, we've covered so much ground, but we've not even started.
Yeah, we could be here for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Someday Jeremy's going to have to talk about the evolution of the human. Oh man. What am I trying to? What?
You wanted me to talk about the stone ape theory?
Yeah, about the mushrooms and how we, learn to create things.
Yeah, Diabolical Witness earlier in the chat said like humans are way different than they were even just 5,000 years ago, and I was just like, oh my god, the stone ape theory. Let me get into that, but that would that's a whole different. That's a whole 3 hours.
Yes, and yes, we've changed immensely in 5,000 years, and there is studies and scientific reasoning as to why that happened, based on a particular substance that was eaten regularly. So we'll have to do a whole scientific podcast sometime and have Jeremy come back and talk about that, because it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I'd like to do the brain.
You'd like to do a podcast about the brain?
Yeah. We touched a little bit of it tonight, but I think it would be, maybe we could include it in that podcast. I don't know, but
you said you wanted to do Egypt too. Egypt I think it was on the last podcast. You said you were really interested in Egypt. Egypt has a lot of that kind of like same thing we're talking about right now. Egypt has a lot of that surrounding it.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine with me. So, okay, so if you guys want to wrap it up, or, I mean, you have more time if you would like. So it's only up to you. My dog is having an opinion, apparently.
I think Maggie has something to say.
Yeah. Maggie was like, I don't care what you're doing, but somebody needs to take me outside. So that's totally up to you. You guys ready to stop, or?
Yeah. We've
Okay.
yeah. It's getting late. Well, it is for me anyway.
Yeah, well, you're not as late as you used to be. Okay,
Well, that's
then.
Okay,
Thank you, both of you. I really enjoyed it, and it was nice for me to not have had to do any research at all, just listen to you guys. So that was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope everybody has been enjoying the 31 Days of Halloween. And as much as I've enjoyed doing it, it's been wonderful, but don't expect a whole lot in the first part of November, because my brain hurts. And tomorrow will be our last video for that. And then we'll have a podcast, of course, next Friday. And Rob and I are going to do folklore of the ocean, about the ocean and ocean creatures and myths and the Kraken and all that good stuff.
Oh man, that stuff gives me the heebies.
Me too, because I'm super afraid of the ocean.
Me too. Like when you were mentioning those dark, or the lantern fish with the little lights, the deep sea ones.
Yes.
I was just like, I got goosebumps.
I know. Just the fact that you know that that's down there underneath your feet, just no. And when we're in the ocean, we're not highest on the food chain anymore. Sorry, guys. It's a whole different world. So I hope you guys join us for that, because I'm really looking forward to that. And like I said, if you feel that you'd like to support my channel, please consider doing so through Patreon or going to Teespring. And I have t-shirts and sweatshirts, and I'm doing mugs and all kinds of things. I even have leggings. So consider that as awesome Christmas presents. And if you are listening to this on my channel, if you're not subscribed and you'd like to be I don't know, and you'd like to be, please subscribe and go ahead and click that like button. People, help me. And because that helps me be seen, and since I'm deemed unworthy of monetization, which, Brian, I have to talk to you about, because you're going to be deemed unworthy for the same reason, and I'll tell you why. But if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, go ahead and click that bell as well. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And I guess I will see you on the flip side. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, moderator Maya. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.